Lieutenant Brianna Kowalski had been the human liaison officer aboard the Galactic Rescue Coordination vessel. Merciful calculation for exactly 8 days, which meant she'd spent approximately 7.5 of those days wondering what kind of cosmic joke had landed her here. The bridge was chaos, but the organized kind. The kind where everyone knew their role, executed it flawlessly, and accepted the inevitable casualties with what Bree could only describe as disturbing calm. Verith Prime was dying. Had been dying for the past 4 hours, would be completely dead in 6 more. Toxic atmospheric cascade, something to do with industrial runoff meeting volcanic activity, meeting terrible luck. The whole planet was turning into a giant gas chamber, and the Varath colonists were evacuating with the kind of efficiency that would make German engineers weep with envy. Pack leader Zurika stood at the command console, his wolf-like features composed despite the disaster unfolding on the view screen below. His silver-gray fur was immaculate, his posture was perfect, and when he delivered the status report, his voice carried absolutely no emotion whatsoever. Evacuation proceeding within optimal parameters. Current retrieval, 89% of population. Projected final retrieval, 89.3%. Acceptable margins. Bree, who'd been watching the organized evacuation with increasing unease, finally spoke up. What about the other 11%? Every head on the bridge turned toward her. Well, every head, sensor cluster, and floating consciousness orb. The Verith crew wasn't used to their human liaison actually participating. Zrika's ears flicked, probably their equivalent of raising an eyebrow. Casualties are distributed across inaccessible regions. Primary concentration: 17 cubs trapped in Northern Crevasse region. Atmospheric degradation accelerating in that sector. Retrieval probability calculated at 3%. 3%. Bree repeated the number slowly, like maybe she'd misheard. Correct. We honor their sacrifice. They will be remembered in the pack songs. You're just leaving them. It wasn't a question. It came out flat, matter of fact, because Bree's brain was still processing what she was hearing. Zrika's expression, insofar as his alien features could be read, showed something that might have been sadness, might have been resignation. Lieutenant Kowalski, we are rescue coordinators. We calculate risk versus reward. We save who we can save. 17 cubs in an inaccessible region with 3% retrieval probability versus guaranteed survival of 4,000 colonists currently in transit? It is the rational choice. We save the many by not risking resources on the few. They're kids. They are cubs, yes. This does not change the mathematics. Bree looked at the view screen. At the planet below, its atmosphere already starting to show orange streaks of toxicity. At the neat rows of evacuation ships in holding patterns. At the Northern Crevasse region, marked in red on the tactical display with the label, unsurvivable, abandoned. She'd done mountain rescue in Colorado for 6 years before this gig. She'd pulled people out of avalanches, crevasses, whiteouts that meteorologists said were unsurvivable. She'd spent 3 days in a blizzard once looking for a lost hiker, found him hypothermic but alive, and gotten a formal reprimand for reckless endangerment of rescue personnel. 3% wasn't great odds, but it wasn't zero. What equipment do we have available? She asked. Zrika's ears flattened. Lieutenant, I must insist you understand. What? Equipment. Something in her tone made him pause. The bridge went very quiet. 1 emergency shuttle, he said slowly. Minimal atmospheric shielding. Enough oxygen for 6 hours. Basic medical supplies. It is designated for command staff evacuation in case of... Cool. I'm taking it. The silence that followed was the kind you get right before an avalanche. The kind where the universe holds its breath. You cannot. Zrika's voice was very controlled. Very careful. That shuttle is not authorized for... Yeah, I'm getting a lot of cannot and not authorized. But what I'm not hearing is anyone saying they're going to stop me. Bree was already moving toward the bridge exit, pulling up the shuttle bay location on her wrist display. Lieutenant Kowalski. Zrika stepped away from his console. That region is inaccessible for a reason. The atmospheric degradation is accelerating. The terrain is unstable. The probability of successful retrieval is 3%. The probability of your survival is even lower. I've had worse odds. You are one person. You cannot possibly. 17 kids, right? Northern Crevasse? She was at the door now. I'll need the coordinates downloaded to the shuttle, and maybe a map of the cave systems if you've got one. This is irrational. Bree turned back, and for the first time since boarding this ship, she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile she used right before doing something spectacularly stupid. Yeah, well, rational left 17 kids to die, so I'm gonna go with irrational and see how that works out. She was in the corridor before anyone could respond. The shuttle bay was exactly where the map said it would be. The emergency shuttle was a compact, practical thing. Basically, a reinforced box with engines and life support. It would fit maybe 20 people if they were friendly. Perfect. Bree ran through pre-flight while the increasingly frantic communications from the bridge crackled in her ear. Lieutenant, this is a direct order. Noted. She ignored it. You have no authorization for... Also noted. She finished the engine warm-up. The shuttle is not equipped for toxic atmosphere retrieval in unstable terrain. Starting to notice a pattern where you guys tell me what I can't do right before I do. She sealed the hatch. Zrika's voice came through, and for the first time, there was actual emotion in it. Something between anger and what might have been fear. Lieutenant Kowalski, if you launch that shuttle, you will die. Those cubs will die. This serves no purpose. Maybe not. Bree punched in the coordinates for the Northern Crevasse. But at least they won't die alone. She launched before anyone could override the bay doors. The shuttle dropped away from the merciful calculation like a stone, caught the planet's gravity well, and started its descent. Behind her, she could hear the bridge communications dissolving into what sounded like controlled panic in multiple alien languages. On the bridge of the merciful calculation, Zrika stood frozen at his console, watching the shuttle's trajectory on his display. His second-in-command, a younger Varath named Crevasse, approached cautiously. Pack leader, should we attempt retrieval? Of the human? Yes. Zrika's ears were flat against his skull. His claws had extended unconsciously, scraping against the console's edge. He was doing calculations in his head. Trajectory, atmospheric windows, retrieval probability. All the numbers said the same thing. No, he said quietly. We cannot retrieve her. She will reach the surface in 14 minutes. The Northern Crevasse region will be completely toxic in 4 hours and 23 minutes. Even if she successfully retrieves the cubs, which she will not, there is insufficient time to return to orbit before atmospheric collapse. Then she is going to die for children that are not even her species, Zrika finished. His voice was very soft. And we are going to watch. On every screen, the small emergency shuttle continued its descent toward the dying world below. And on the bridge of the merciful calculation, for the first time in Varath rescue history, no one knew what to do. The shuttle's hull screamed as it hit the upper atmosphere. Bree adjusted the angle of descent, watching the heat shields flare orange through the viewport. The atmospheric composition readings were already turning ugly. Particulate matter at 40% and climbing, toxicity levels ramping up fast. Pretty standard, actually, she muttered to herself, running through her mental checklist. Like that time outside Anchorage, except with more orange and less snow. Lieutenant Kowalski, Zrika's voice crackled through the comm, tight with barely controlled panic. Your current trajectory will place you directly in the degradation zone. Abort descent immediately. Can't abort. Already committed to the glide path. Then alter course to a safer landing zone. The cubs aren't in a safer landing zone. They're in the Northern Crevasse, which is where I'm going. A pause. Then, our calculations show your current survival probability at 8% and declining. Cool. That's up from 3%. We're improving already. On the bridge of the merciful calculation, Crevasse looked at his pack leader with what could only be described as horror. She thinks 8% is good. Zrika's claws were now permanently extended, scoring deep marks in his console. She is insane. Should we... There is nothing we can do. The pack leader's voice was hollow. We watch. We document. We bear witness to her sacrifice. Back in the shuttle, Bree was actually enjoying herself in a perverse sort of way. The descent was hairy, sure, but she'd landed helicopters in worse conditions. That blizzard rescue in Alaska had been way worse. Visibility of about 3 feet, winds that wanted to slam her into a mountain, and a search area the size of Rhode Island. This was just some toxic atmosphere and unstable terrain. Practically a vacation. I've done rescues in worse conditions, she said into the comm, mostly to fill the silence. One time in Alaska. That is not reassuring, Zrika's voice cracked. The Northern Crevasse came into view, a jagged wound in the planet's surface, maybe 200 meters deep, already half filled with orange toxic fog. The walls were unstable, chunks of rock the size of cars occasionally breaking loose and tumbling down. Okay, Bree said. That's less good. She brought the shuttle down anyway, threading it between the collapsing walls with the kind of precision that came from 6 years of flying rescue ops in mountain terrain. The landing was rough. She clipped a rock formation, scraped the hull, and came down harder than she'd like. But they were down. The shuttle rocked as another chunk of crevasse wall collapsed nearby. Bree grabbed her emergency pack, checked her oxygen supply, and sealed her helmet. 3 hours of air. Better than nothing. The cave entrance was exactly where the scan said it would be. She had to climb over fallen rocks to reach it, and the atmosphere was already burning through her suit's outer layer in spots, but she made it. Inside the cave, 17 pairs of eyes reflected her helmet light. The cubs were huddled together in a tight pack, fur matted with dust and fear. They ranged from maybe 4 years old to 8 in human terms, all of them wolf-like, all of them terrified. Some had visible injuries, cuts, burns from the toxic atmosphere, one with what looked like a broken leg. They were also growling. Hey there, Bree said, keeping her voice calm and even. I'm Bree. I'm here to get you out. The largest cub, a female with gray fur and amber eyes, bared her teeth. Stay back. Okay, I can do that. Bree sat down, making herself smaller, less threatening. She pulled out an emergency ration bar from her pack. Anyone hungry? 17 noses twitched. I've got about 20 of these. Not great, but they're calories. She broke off a piece and tossed it gently toward the cubs. Take it. Share it around. The oldest female sniffed it suspiciously, then took a small bite. Her eyes widened. Within seconds, the ration bars were gone. Bree keyed her comm. Found all 17. Getting them to the shuttle now. The relief in Zrika's voice was palpable. Confirmed. Be advised, atmospheric degradation has accelerated. You have 43 minutes before the region reaches total toxicity. You must evacuate immediately. Then I better hurry. Bree stood, turning to the cubs. All right, kids, time to go. Follow me. None of them moved. The oldest female spoke, her voice small. The pack adults said to stay here. Stay hidden, wait for retrieval. I know. But the retrieval is here. I'm taking you to the shuttle. What if there are predators outside? Then I'll handle them. Come on. Still, they didn't move. They pressed closer together, instinct overriding everything else. When threatened, stay hidden, stay small, wait for the pack adults. Except the pack adults had already left. Bree looked at her timer. 40 minutes now. Not enough time to coax them gently. She did something that would probably get her fired if she ever made it back to the merciful calculation. She lay down. Right there on the cave floor, beside the huddle of terrified cubs. Made herself vulnerable. Made herself part of the pack. Hey, she said softly. I know you're scared. I get it. Your world is ending, the adults left, and some weird alien showed up talking about shuttles. That's terrifying. The cubs stared at her. But here's the thing. I'm not leaving. Not without all of you. I came down here specifically to get you out. And I'm not going back empty-handed. She reached out slowly, let the oldest female sniff her gloved hand. I'm going to get you out of here. All of you, I promise. Why? The cub asked. Her voice broke. We are not your pack. Bree smiled behind her helmet. You are now. For a moment, Nothing happened. Then slowly, the oldest cub stood. Walked over to Bree. Pressed her muzzle against the human's shoulder. One by one, the others followed. "Okay," Bree said, standing carefully. "Shuttle's about 50 meters that way. We're going to walk together. Anyone who can't walk, I'll carry. Anyone who's scared, stay close. We do this as a pack, got it?" 17 cubs nodded. They made it halfway to the shuttle before the crevasse started to collapse in earnest. Bree's timer read 28 minutes when the first major wall section gave way. Rock thundered down, blocking their original path. The toxic atmosphere was getting thicker, orange fog creeping along the ground. "Lieutenant," Zreka's voice was sharp with fear. "We're reading major structural instability in your location. You must evacuate immediately." "Working on it." Bree scooped up 2 smaller cubs, one under each arm. "Everyone stay together. Follow the big ones." Another crash. Another wall section gone. The cave system was coming apart. "Lieutenant Kowalski, the atmospheric readings. You must evacuate alone. Save yourself. This is a direct order." Bree looked at the 17 cubs following her. At their trust. At their hope. "Yeah," she said. "That's not happening." She led them through the collapsing cave system, over fallen rocks, under overhangs that groaned with stress. The toxic atmosphere was burning through her suit. Her oxygen was at 40%. One of the cubs was crying. 2 more were limping badly. The shuttle came into view through the orange fog. "Almost there," Bree shouted. "Keep moving." Then the transmission from the merciful calculation cut to static. On the bridge, Crevasse looked at his console in horror. "Pack leader, we've lost contact with the surface." Zreka stood very still. "Confirmed. Should we attempt?" "No." The word was hollow. "We cannot reach her. We cannot help her. We can only—" He trailed off, unable to finish. Wait. They could only wait. And hope. And on the surface of Vareth Prime, Bree shoved the last of the 17 cubs into the shuttle, sealed the hatch, and collapsed into the pilot's seat. Her oxygen was at 12%. The shuttle wouldn't start. "Of course," she muttered, already pulling up the diagnostic panel. Why would anything be easy? On the bridge of the merciful calculation, the final evacuation count came through with mechanical precision. "All primary evacuation vessels accounted for," Crevasse reported. "Population retrieval, 89.2%, within projected parameters." Zreka stared at the display showing Vareth Prime below. The planet was dying faster now, great swaths of orange toxic atmosphere spreading across the surface like infection. In another 3 hours, nothing would survive down there. "Prepare for departure," he said. The bridge crew moved to comply. This was protocol. This was rational. They had saved who they could save. Remaining in orbit served no purpose. Zreka's finger hovered over the departure authorization. "We wait," he said suddenly. Every station on the bridge went quiet. "Pack leader?" Crevasse's voice was carefully neutral. "Standard protocol requires immediate departure once evacuation is complete. The planet is unstable. Remaining serves no—" "We wait." "For how long?" Zreka looked at the chrono display. Dawn would break over the Northern Crevasse region in 4 hours. Until dawn. "Pack leader." Crevasse approached carefully, the way you'd approach someone who'd suddenly lost their mind. "She is almost certainly dead. The shuttle lost contact over an hour ago. Even if she survived the cave system collapse, even if she somehow retrieved the cubs, even if she made it back to the shuttle, the atmospheric degradation alone would have—" "We wait until dawn." The bridge crew exchanged looks. This violated every rational protocol they had. You didn't wait for impossible rescues. You didn't risk an entire ship for lost causes. You calculated, you accepted losses, you moved on. The communication console chimed. "Galactic Rescue Command." Zreka accepted the call. Fleet Commander Veshetal appeared on the screen, his silver fur bristling with obvious irritation. "Pack Leader Zreka, why is the merciful calculation still in orbit around Vareth Prime? Your evacuation was completed 43 minutes ago. Depart immediately. There is still 1 shuttle unaccounted for. 1 shuttle. 1 human liaison." Veshital's tone suggested he'd already done the math. Acceptable loss. The shuttle has been out of contact for over an hour in a region of total atmospheric collapse. No one survives that. Depart now before you endanger your entire crew. Zrika's claws extended fully. For the first time in his 15-year career with Galactic Rescue, he felt something that might have been anger. Or defiance. Or both. No. Veshital's ears flattened. That was an order, pack leader. And I am refusing it. Zrika stood straighter. We remain in orbit until dawn. We wait for our shuttle. She is dead. We do not know that. The mathematics said the Cubs had a 3% chance of retrieval. The humans said that wasn't zero. Zrika's voice was steady. We wait. The transmission cut off. Veshital would file formal complaints. There would be consequences. Zrika found he didn't care. All stations, he said quietly. We maintain orbit. We watch for any signal from the surface. We wait. The bridge crew, despite their confusion, obeyed. On the surface, Bree was having the worst day of her career, which, given that her career included a helicopter crash in the Rockies, 2 avalanche near misses, and that thing in Alaska that she'd promised never to talk about, was really saying something. Her oxygen was at 12%. 3 Cubs had injuries that needed more than field dressing. The shuttle wouldn't start because something, probably toxic atmosphere, possibly falling rocks, definitely Murphy's Law, had fried the ignition relay. And to top it all off, she was pretty sure she'd broken a rib during the cave collapse. Why don't you leave us? One of the younger Cubs asked. His voice was small, scared. Save yourself, like the pack adults said. Bree looked up from the ignition panel, where she was currently elbow-deep in wiring. Kid, I once spent 3 days in a blizzard looking for a golden retriever named Biscuit. You think I'm leaving you? But you'll die. Maybe. Or maybe I fix this shuttle and we all get out of here. She pulled out a fried relay, cursed under her breath. Either way, I'm not leaving. So how about you make yourself useful and hand me that toolkit over there? The Cubs watched in fascination as Bree tore apart the shuttle's systems. She had emergency supplies, duct tape, wire strippers, and approximately 8 years of making do with whatever was available in the middle of nowhere. Also, spite. Never underestimate spite as a motivational tool. You don't know if this will work, the oldest Cub observed. She'd positioned herself as Bree's assistant, handing over tools when asked. Nope. Bree bypassed the fried relay entirely, jury-rigging a direct connection. That would probably violate about 40 safety protocols. But we're trying anyway. That's kind of my whole thing. Her oxygen hit 8%. The timer showed 6 minutes until total atmospheric toxicity reached the crevasse. Come on, Bree muttered, connecting the last wire. Come on, you temperamental piece of... The engines coughed, sputtered, caught. Yes! Bree slammed the panel shut. Everyone strap in! Now! She threw herself into the pilot's seat as the Cubs scrambled for safety harness. Her oxygen was at 5%. The crevasse walls were collapsing in earnest now, huge sections coming down like dominoes. Bree punched the throttle. The shuttle lurched upward, scraping both sides of the crevasse as it climbed. Orange toxic atmosphere ate at the hull, warning lights screaming about breach points and structural failure. The engines whined in protest. Hold together, Bree said through gritted teeth. Just a little longer. The shuttle broke free of the crevasse, climbed through the toxic atmosphere. Hull integrity at 40%. Life support failing. Oxygen at 2%. Bree's vision started to tunnel. She kept flying. Behind her, one of the Cubs was crying. Another was praying in their language. The oldest one was holding the younger ones, her eyes fixed on Bree. Almost there, Bree said, or tried to say. Her voice came out as a rasp. The atmosphere thinned. Stars appeared through the viewport. Bree's oxygen hit 0. She kept flying. On the bridge of the merciful calculation, it was Crevasse who saw it first. Pack leader, his voice cracked. Contact, emergency shuttle breaking atmosphere. The bridge erupted, Every station activated, running scans, plotting trajectories. Life support status? Zrika demanded. Critical failure. Hull breached in multiple locations. I'm reading. Crevalle's voice went quiet. No oxygen in the shuttle. Survivors? Unknown. The shuttle is on autopilot trajectory toward our position. Zrika's heart, if Varath had hearts the way humans did, would have stopped. Autopilot meant no conscious pilot, which meant intercept course, emergency retrieval, now. The merciful calculation moved, tractor beams reaching out to catch the dying shuttle. They pulled it into the bay with the kind of desperate urgency usually reserved for medical emergencies. The bay crew stood ready with emergency medical equipment. Zrika ran from the bridge, Crevalle at his heels. The shuttle looked like it had been through a war. Hull scorched and pitted, entire sections melted away, one engine completely gone. The airlock cycled. The inner door opened. Bree stumbled out, helmet cracked, suit torn, carrying two small cubs in her arms. She looked like she'd been through a blender. Blood, bruises, burns, moving on sheer will alone. Behind her, 15 more cubs emerged from the shuttle, helping each other, limping, crying, but alive. All of them breathing. Bree took 3 steps, set the cubs down gently, and collapsed. The bay erupted in motion. Medical teams, emergency protocols, coordinated chaos. But for one moment, everyone just stared. Zrika reached Bree first, dropping to his knees beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, barely conscious, oxygen deprived, but still somehow defiant. Told you, she rasped. All of them. Then her eyes closed. The medical team swarmed her. The cubs were being checked, treated, given oxygen and warmth. Zrika stood slowly, looking at the 17 cubs, traumatized, injured, but alive. All of them alive. Crevalle stood beside him, his voice barely a whisper. She came back. She actually came back. With all of them. Yes, Zrika said quietly. She did. Around them, the Varath crew stood in stunned silence. Because they had all calculated the odds. They had all accepted the rational choice. They had all written off the cubs as acceptable losses. And one human, one stubborn, irrational, impossible human, had proven them all wrong. The planet below continued its death, atmosphere collapsing into total toxicity. But on the merciful calculation, 17 cubs who should have died were breathing. And in the medical bay, one human liaison who absolutely should have died was being kept alive by doctors who couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. The mathematics didn't work. The logic didn't track. The survival probability had been effectively 0. But she'd done it anyway. And somehow, impossibly, that made all the difference. Bree woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the sound of breathing. A lot of breathing. She opened her eyes slowly, inventory checking her body through the haze of painkillers. Broken rib, taped, burns, treated. Oxygen deprivation, apparently survived. Various other injuries, probably patched. And surrounding her medical bay bed, curled up on every available surface, were 17 wolf-like cubs. Well, she croaked, this is cozy. The oldest cub, the female with gray fur and amber eyes, lifted her head immediately. You're awake. Unfortunately. Bree tried to sit up, winced, gave up. How long was I out? 18 hours. The medical staff said you survived atmospheric toxicity, oxygen deprivation, and blunt force trauma that should have killed you 3 times over. Yeah, that sounds about right for a Tuesday. The door hissed open. Zrika entered, his posture carefully controlled. Behind him, Crevalle hovered nervously. Lieutenant Kowalski. Zrika's voice was formal, neutral. You violated direct orders, endangered yourself, operated outside all rational parameters and safety protocols. Bree sighed. Yeah, I figured you'd be mad about that. I am not mad. Zrika moved closer, and Bree realized his ears were flat. Not in anger, but confusion. I do not understand. Why did you do this? Which part? All of it. You knew the odds. You knew the risks. You nearly died. Why? Bree looked at the 17 cubs surrounding her bed, at their faces, at the fact that they were breathing. Because they were kids, she said simply. And they were alive. That's enough. But the risk to yourself, where I come from, we have a saying. Bree met his eyes. Acceptable losses is what you say when you've given up. I don't give up. Shrika stood very still. But the mathematics? The math said they'd die. They're not dead. So maybe the math was wrong. Bree shrugged, then regretted it when her ribs protested. Or maybe the math just didn't account for stubbornness. Either way, they're here. That's what matters. Zrika's claws extended, retracted. He looked like someone whose entire world view had been picked up, shaken, and put back down slightly crooked. You are irrational, he said finally. Yeah, but 17 kids are alive, so I'm calling it a win. The news spread across the galactic rescue network like wildfire, or more accurately, like a diplomatic incident that made wildfire look tame by comparison. Species reactions varied wildly. The Krith, insectoid logicians, were horrified. Humans didn't accept casualty calculations. They took risks without proper probability assessment. This was chaos. This was dangerous. The Vex Ali, emotional empaths, were inspired. What if they tried harder? What if acceptable losses wasn't acceptable? The Threen, military strategists, were terrified. Humans would risk themselves for non-species members. The tactical implications were disturbing. Galactic Rescue Command convened an emergency session 3 days after the Vareth Prime incident. The topic: should humans be allowed in rescue operations if they refuse to accept established loss parameters? The debate lasted 6 hours. Commander Veshtal argued for restrictions. Humans demonstrate reckless disregard for statistical probability. They endanger operations. A Varath delegate stood. It took a moment for Bree, watching the proceedings via hologram from her medical bay, to recognize her. It was the oldest cub, the female with gray fur and amber eyes. Except she wasn't a cub anymore. She was an adult, wearing the insignia of Galactic Rescue. I am Kiravel of the Vareth clans, she said formally. I was one of the 17 deemed acceptable losses on Vareth Prime. Lieutenant Kowalski violated every protocol to save us. She should have died. We should have died. The mathematics said we would die. She paused. We did not die, because one human refused to accept our deaths as inevitable. Kiravel looked directly at the assembled command. I propose we stop debating whether to restrict her. I propose we make her train all of us. The chamber erupted in argument. 2 days later, they offered Bree a position. She was still in the medical bay when Zrika delivered the news. Chief of High-Risk Rescue Operations, he said, pulling up the official document. You would handle retrieval scenarios other agencies have classified as impossible or unsurvivable. Bree read through the job description. So you want me to do the stuff you've already given up on? Essentially, yes. And I can do it my way? No acceptable losses? No probability cutoffs? No leaving people behind because the math says it's too hard? Zrika's ears flicked. Suppose that is the point. Then yeah. Bree grinned. I'm in. Zrika's ears flicked forward. There is one condition. Of course there is. You must accept a formal command structure, oversight, budget limitations. He paused. And you must file mission reports. Bree's grin faded. Paperwork? Extensive paperwork. That's cruel and unusual. That is bureaucracy. Zrika's expression might have been amusement. You can violate probability, ignore statistics, and rewrite rescue doctrine. But you cannot escape administrative requirements. You know what? Fine. I'll do the paperwork. Bree pointed at him. But I'm delegating most of it to you. I assumed as much. And I'm naming the division. Zrika's ears went flat. The official designation is High-Risk Retrieval Operations. Yeah, but everyone's calling it the Lost Cause Division anyway. Might as well make it official. That is not appropriate for a military organization. Good thing we're rescue, not military. Bree was already planning equipment requisitions in her head. I'll need full shuttle modifications, updated medical supplies, and at least 3 people who are comfortable with the phrase, probably won't explode. This is going to be a disaster. Probably, but a successful disaster. She held out her hand. Deal? Zrika looked at her hand, the human gesture of agreement he'd learned over the past 6 months. Then he extended his paw and shook it. Deal. May the ancestors have mercy on us both. 6 months later, the merciful calculation looked different. The ship had been retrofitted. New equipment, modified shuttles, and a crew that was starting to understand that impossible wasn't the same as not worth trying. Bree stood on the bridge, reviewing mission parameters. Around her, the crew worked with efficiency. But now, with something else. Something that looked like hope. 17 impossible rescues completed, Crevasse reported. He'd become Bree's unofficial logistics coordinator, mainly because he was good at calculating supply needs for missions that shouldn't succeed. Success rate, 100%. That's because we don't give up until we succeed, Bree said. Or die. But mostly the first thing. The 17 cubs she'd saved, now young adults, had become her unofficial intern squad. They were learning human stubbornness, which turned out to be highly teachable. Zrika had somehow become her second in command, despite the fact that he still thought everything she did was irrational. This is still irrational, he said, right on cue. Yeah, but it works. That makes it worse somehow. His ears were flat again. You are breaking every established rescue doctrine. Good. The doctrines were leaving people behind. The communication console chimed. New mission parameters. Bree pulled up the details. Station collapse in the outer rim. 200 beings trapped in an unstable structure. Atmospheric venting in progress. Time to critical failure, 4 hours. Estimated survival probability, 2%. Every other rescue agency in the sector had already declared it hopeless. Pack it up, people, Bree called out. We've got work to do. Her crew didn't even question it. They just moved. Kiravel was already prepping shuttles. Another former cub was running equipment checks. The mixed species crew, Varath, Threen, Krith, even a couple of Vexali empaths, worked together with the kind of coordinated determination that came from learning that impossible was just a suggestion. Zrika watched them prepare, his expression unreadable. You are teaching the galaxy to be irrational, he said quietly. Bree grinned. I'm teaching them to be stubborn. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah. Irrational gives up when the math says to. Stubborn says the math can go to hell. She pulled on her rescue harness, checking seals. We'll be back in 8 hours, with all 200. You cannot know that. Watch me. As they headed for the shuttle bay, Zrika fell into step beside her. You know, he said. You have fundamentally altered rescue operations across 9 sectors. Species that accepted losses for millennia are now questioning their protocols. The Krith have formed committees. The Vexali have started emotional resilience training. The Threen are developing new tactical doctrines based on human stubbornness. Is that a problem? I have not decided yet. His ears flicked in what might have been amusement. Fleet Command is having a breakdown because your success rates are breaking all their statistical models. Good. The head statistician requested psychological evaluation last week. She kept muttering about probability violations and impossible variables. Even better. Bree paused at the shuttle bay entrance. You coming, or are you staying behind to be rational? Zrika's ears went forward. I am coming. Someone needs to document this continued violation of all established protocols. Sure, that's why you're coming. They boarded the shuttle. The crew was ready. 200 beings were trapped in an impossible situation that every other agency had written off as acceptable losses. But the Lost Cause Division, as they'd unofficially named themselves, didn't accept losses. They didn't accept impossible. They just showed up, tried everything, and refused to quit until everyone was home. Bree settled into the pilot's seat, running pre-flight checks. Lieutenant, Kiravel called from her station. The other agencies are requesting we stand down. They say we're wasting resources on a lost cause. Tell them we specialize in lost causes, Bree replied. It's kind of our thing. The shuttle launched, followed by 3 more. They headed toward the collapsing station, toward 200 people who thought they'd been abandoned. Toward impossible odds and acceptable losses and all the rational reasons why they should turn back. And they kept going anyway. Because the galaxy was learning something it should have known all along. Sometimes the math is wrong. Sometimes impossible just means nobody's tried hard enough yet. Sometimes acceptable losses are only acceptable to people who've already given up. And humans? Humans had never heard of her.